two things to keep in mind. One, things that students like, and then maybe something that will challenge the students too, a little bit out of their comfort zone. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Athena's Agora. Hello, Professor Emma.
Hi, Dr. Kirsten.
How are you?
I'm great.
Great. All right, let's get started. So we are in the middle of our series on finding classes.
Yeah.
And the last time we were talking about how we were going to talk about modalities. So let's talk about modalities.
What a great idea.
First of all, why don't you tell us what is a modality?
Sure. Just like how I have all of my slides, I start with our definitions.
There you go. Gotta start with the definitions.
So, like, different ways of delivering the content. So, like, we're just going to stick with online because I think that we have certainly plenty to say about it. But for online classes, do you have video on? Do you have slides with content? Do you have webinars at all?
Right.
Do you have webinars where the kids can chat to each other? Do you have webinars where they just talk to the teacher or not at all? Different ways of delivering the content.
Exactly. And I think last time we were talking about how you're trying to find the classes that fit the student, right? There's two things to keep in mind. One, things that students like, and then maybe something that will challenge the students too, a little bit out of their comfort zone, not to the point where it's going to be extremely disruptive to the family, but enough so that they are learning to adapt and to be resilient through their learning.
And be able to do things in different environments too.
Yes.
Because you don't want to be able to just learn well in only one environment, because in the future you're going to be in a whole bunch of different environments.
Exactly.
So you want to be able to adapt as much as possible.
Right. It kind of reminds me, though, this idea of distance learning. I'm going to age myself here. But, a long time ago, before the internet, they used to have courses that you could take where you would write into somebody, actually use snail mail, actually write into people, and you would correspond back and forth. And now...
A correspondence course.
Yes, exactly. And so now we have the ability to connect instantaneously online, which is phenomenal. Now, when I started Athena's, it was before people really knew what a webinar was. Like, they had no idea. I would have to actually explain what a webinar was. I'd have to define it. Speaking of definitions. And now, especially after we went through 2020 with COVID and everything, now everybody knows all about how to interact online. Now, that's a little bit of an offshoot, but it's really important when you're looking for a class online that you're not looking for school online. You want to make sure that the delivery is specifically an online class, not just taking school and putting it online. And that's one of the problems that people had in 2020, is they're trying to recreate school online. So for example, like if you have a child in school, they go to school in the classroom, they're sitting in the classroom, they're doing activities, they're, walking from class to class. You have that dynamic environment. So when people were trying to go online, they were thinking they were going to sit in front of the camera all day. And there's a lot of fatigue with that. Oh, yeah. It's really hard. So
it's not the same experience at all. Like, you have to be able to adapt it. And I think that also goes with when you're choosing classes now, you want to make sure that the instructor is able to deliver that content in a way that makes sense for the online space.
Yes.
Because I was in college during 2020.
Yes.
I was thankfully at the very end of my undergrad. But I, at that point, had been teaching for about 4 years.
Teaching online
for about 4 years through Athena's. And I had obviously been taking online classes for quite a bit longer than that. And so when my professors were trying their very best to teach online. I was over there like, oh, you don't know how to read the chat. You don't know that the chat exists.
Right.
Because you just started learning how to use Zoom last week. Yeah. So it was very interesting for me because I know how to talk and read the chat and figure out what I'm going to say next. There's a lot of multitasking that happens. And it was very interesting for me to watch people try very hard to do that, but they didn't have that skill set because they were used to being in an in-person classroom. So it is very important to make sure that the teacher is able to do it all. And it comes with, practice, but it also comes with realizing that it's not the same.
No, it's not different. The same. Mm-hmm. You also need to connect with, as teachers need to connect on an emotional level too, because otherwise it's very dry, right? And there's nothing, it's just giving the facts and just giving the information. You want to make sure that they can connect with your child on an emotional level as well, which is why I wrote a book with a colleague of mine on combining the emotional intelligence with the online classroom. So more on that later. But yeah, that's super important. You want to be able to connect with your students. And I want to get back to my point, though, that I was making before with instead of having it every single day, most online courses, even just classes, they'll meet maybe once or twice a week.
Unless it's like a camp.
Yeah, unless it's a camp. Maybe for an hour or two. And then the rest of the time is more asynchronous working. And that's, again, going back to what we were talking about previously with the flexibility that you want to make sure that the organization is flexible in whatever mode that they have.
Well, one of the things during COVID, too, was that when they put school online, a lot of organizations were very strict about webcams. And that is something that we're not strict on because we don't have webcams. Exactly. So that's another thing. I mean, when I'm on video, like, for whatever I'm doing online, it is tiring to be on video for half an hour.
Yes.
So these poor kids were on video however long a school day is without being able to look away from the screen for a little bit. Yeah.
And at Athena's, we don't have video in our classes because we want the kids to be in their heads and really be focused on the material. And when you are looking so intently at the screen, you're not in your head. So we'll have students who will draw or they'll move around, they'll do other things while they're learning because it gets so cerebral. And we also have chat on, which means that the students can talk to each other and to the teacher by typing during the class, during the webinar itself. Not only do we have the voice, the kids can raise their virtual hands and they can use their microphones as well, but you also have the chat. So technically you could have like 3 conversations happening at one time or more.
And it's our job to be involved in all of those conversations.
So the teacher is delivering the content, also answering questions and having conversation about the content, about what they're talking about with the students, verbal conversations. But then there's also conversations that are happening in the chat. So this is really challenging and very fun for me. It's like when I teach philosophy, there's so many conversations. And we'll be having conversations with the students. We'll be talking to each other, with me, all about whatever philosophical discussion we're having. And then there could be 3 different conversations happening in the chat. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun because you're learning so much and your brain is so active. Then like the kids will say, my brain is broken. Oh my goodness. They'll put exploding brain emojis and stuff. So it's really fun.
And that's something you can't do in real life.
No,
you can't have that same experience. And that is something that I did miss when I was in in-person classes at college, because sometimes I just wanted to put a little side comment about something that was on a slide in the chat, but I didn't have the chat. Because when you have to actually raise your hand and say something in a real life setting, that's putting a lot more weight on that interaction than just saying something on the side in the chat. That was another thing, actually, that when we went online, my professors did not understand that dynamic at all.
Right.
And so they were very, like, strict on the way that chat was used. But that's not really how it works online, because it's a different capacity. It's not the same.
It's kind of like, it's not as formal. It's more of an informal little, like, side comment, hey, you know, and you're like, oh, isn't that funny? That's and so then fun. People will put LOL and they'll, you know, like, I don't like that. Or they'll say, ooh, what? You know, they'll just, like, put out little
it's like the chatter.
Quips.
It's the chatter.
Yeah, it's the chatter.
In the chat.
Oh. So silly.
But it's a different dynamic. And I think that sometimes especially when they're new to that environment, that might not necessarily be something that they understand. Sometimes you can kind of tell who has been in more of like a traditional school setting when they come to us.
Yes.
Because they are not talking in the chat. And they'll only raise their hand, and they'll be trying to make sure that they're being respectful, which is very sweet, but it's a different modality.
Right.
So it's also helpful to try out a different modality with your kid to get an idea of how that works for that program. Because if you're starting a new program, well, they might have really strict chat rules.
Yes.
And it might be that you can't use any emojis or anything like that. And so I think that that's important too, because especially if it's a new environment, it can be a little bit scary to try it out for the first time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, this is reminding me, I can't remember if it was, you might not remember this either, but there was a student who was trying a different, maybe they were going to college, like online or something, and their parent got them a whiteboard because they missed having the chat, so they would quickly write down the whiteboard.
I do you remember
that? Yeah, because they were so used to having chat, and they felt like they couldn't
They didn't
share.
have that outlet.
They didn't have the outlet, so I brainstormed with them. So they would just write things on this whiteboard, and then the mother would take a picture of it and send it to me, which was really cute. But I love that. I love that there is, okay, and this is another conversation that we'll have about community, but that's what's so cool about having a community like this, is that even after they've aged out, you can still connect with them. I don't know, it's really fun.
It is.
So,
it's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was also going to say, though, with the different modalities, it is super important as a parent when you're picking a class for a student, for your child, to look at how the organization runs their webinars or their classes, and realize that there are reasons behind it.
Yeah.
Because we have specific reasons on why we, don't have video, why we have the chat on, why we do things the way that we do, because it fits with our goals as an organization and our philosophy. But other organizations will do things completely different. Like AOPS, they will have just chat on because that works for their way of doing things, that goes along with it. So, and then there are other organizations where they will turn on the video. There are other organizations where they will have just email correspondence. We still do have those. But there are reasons for that. And again, it goes back to being able to adapt to those different ways of doing things. There are reasons why each of the organizations do the things the way that they do. And it's important that we have such variety because everybody is different. Yeah. So,
and that's important to know, because sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to be able to put my kid in this class and it will work. But it doesn't always work.
Right.
That's okay.
And it is okay. And yeah.
But also trying new things, because especially after COVID, well, after the, shutdowns of COVID, parents have come to us saying that their kid only likes having video.
Right.
When they haven't tried anything else.
Right.
And so, you may find that actually video is really emotionally and mentally exhausting for them, as it is for a lot of kids.
Even just having the teacher's video on, because then they're focused on the teacher and not on the subject, and they forget to pay attention to the subject itself.
Yeah. And also, I would not be a very non-distracting teacher on camera. No. I would be moving all around. I would not be a non-distracting influence.
We would not see you in the frame.
No, you wouldn't.
But I should say, there are other opportunities, at least at Athena's, where you can see the teacher. So like, for example, I have kind of like a social time where we meet together and we do body doubling, which is
you're working on tasks together parallel. You're not necessarily all doing the same task, although sometimes you are.
Emma's always better with the definitions than
I. It's a definition episode.
So then with that, I have my video on because it's more of a relaxed thing where we're talking and we're working on things together. Everybody's working on something different. So there are those types of situations where we will actually see each other. The students don't have to have their video on, but my video is on. But that's more social and it's not as academic. So
you're also not looking at slides.
Right.
And you're not talking about content in the same way.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a difference with that.
Yeah. And it just depends on what makes the most sense in the kid's brain too. I mean, I do know people who really like having video on. I also know people who really don't like having video on.
Well, do you remember that in our classes we will have a kind of like an exit survey, but we have surveys throughout the classes. And how many students were so happy to not have any video on, even with the teacher. So we have the data. That's why we do things the way that we do things, because we have the data for that. Yeah. But other organizations are going to be different. Yeah. Everybody's different. But it's, again, really important to get a variety so the student is learning to adapt and be able to move into the future. Yeah. And not just schooling activities or schooling, but just in their lives in general.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's helpful to start it earlier so that they can start to have that capacity for adapting. I wouldn't necessarily suggest going from a class with video on to a class with only text, like immediately, if your kid does not like change.
Right.
But kind of making adjustments.
Segue.
So, moving them into a different realm of how online learning can work. And I think that that's helpful for a growth mindset too. Because then they know that they're able to adapt to different situations. So if their university goes online for a pandemic, then they'll be okay with it. Right. And they might give their teachers some tips.
Yes, or help them through all the way. Wonderful. We will continue this series on choosing classes. I think we have a couple more that we're going to do. All right, wonderful. We'll see you there. Bye for now.